Hey everyone, welcome back to the shop. Super exciting day today. As you can see, I've got the tail fin and the rudder in my hands. I've done the last couple of days, I spent a lot of time sanding and filling and making sure the actual surface is as smooth as it can possibly be, because it's time to actually put covering on this for the first time. So you saw us do the little test wing with the lozenge fabric and the dope. But for this one, we're actually using Oratex. So it's kind of like a typical shrink material that you use in RC modeling. I've never actually used this before, and I was trying to think the other day, probably the last time I covered an RC plane in a shrink film was probably about 25 years ago. So listen, I'm by no means an expert. I've actually had to go back and re-familiarise myself with the old Oratex instructions just to remind myself on how to do it. So anyway, but good to have you along. Hopefully it goes well. All right, here we go. These are the tools that we're going to be using for the covering today. So firstly, here's the Oratex. I just got the natural white colour because that's the colour of the tail of the Fokker D.VL. Here are the instructions, which I'm going to re-familiarise myself with just to make sure I get all the temperatures and everything correct. Obviously I know the basic principles of covering with this sort of material. I actually bought myself a new covering iron, so I particularly like this one because it gives you a digital readout on the actual temperature of the heating plate, which is really good, I think. I just put a brand new blade in the razor blade, which is super important if you want to try and cut this really well. And also I've got a super sharp pair of scissors that I actually just put through the sharpener as well. So, and then obviously here's the tail over here, ready to go. So let's get into it. All right, I was probably trying to be a little bit ambitious. I decided to try and do the fin all in one piece. So see, it starts here, it goes over the top, and then comes down on this side. But I mean, I've only just started shrinking that, and look, it's got a really, I mean, there's still plenty of shrink left to go on that, but you can see that all the work I did into sanding the balsa seems to have paid off. It looks really, really smooth. And now I guess the trickiest part of the covering process is nipping the edges, doing your corners, and trying to make it all nice and neat. But listen, I think as a start, now I might start shrinking the other side. It looks like it started pretty well, so cross fingers, the luck stays with us. All right, well, I don't know how long that took, maybe 30 minutes, but like I say, first time I've tried sort of shrink covering in a very long time. Maybe I was a little bit too ambitious. I actually took one piece and wrapped it all the way over the top. But the benefit of that is, see, there's no seam here. It's just really, really nice and smooth. So, I mean, from my point of view, you can see the reward for all the filling and sanding to make sure there's no bumps on any of the frame. So yeah, from my point of view, I think that looks really beautiful. And as you can see around the back as well, you can't see any seam around the back. I deliberately left balsa wood showing on the bottom because remember, we're going to have to glue this onto the horizontal stab at some point. So listen, from my point of view, I couldn't have really asked for that to have gone any better. All right, a little bit of a trial fit here. Looks beautiful in place, doesn't it? Look at that. Really nice. All right, now let's get on with the rudder. Okay, here we go. Half of it's done. I've got to say, I'm really impressed by this Oratex. It's very forgiving. I mean, I did it the old-fashioned way around the edges here, where you snip little cuts into it and then you bend it around. But I mean, it's really hard to see the cuts. Like, it blends really nicely. So what I'm planning on doing is, when we do this side, I'm going to try and stretch the fabric over the top and not do the cuts. So, but I mean, if you look at that, that's pretty neat looking, I think. It looks absolutely fantastic. So obviously eventually we're going to have the German cross in there, which will look super cool. But and you see down here, I did quite a nice job cutting around the outside of the horn here. This will all be painted the olive colour, the green colour that all the German planes had back in the day. But yeah, pretty happy with that. All right, I tried a slightly different technique. So rather than just ironing it on, going around the corner, what I actually got is got the heat gun here, the new heat gun that I bought for myself for this project. And then basically what you do is you heat the film and you pull it down around the edge, and have a look at how well that's gone around the edge. I know this looks a bit messy now, but the idea was have it wrap all the way around as one piece, no little slashes. And then what I'll do is I'll run a blade around the inside. You won't see any join whatsoever. So listen, I think this is coming together really well. Probably much better than I thought I would be able to do. This little cutout that I made here, I will be honest, I actually messed up the piece of covering twice. I cut it out on the wrong side, on the shiny sticky side rather than on the proper side. So anyway, so you know, you live and learn. Wasted a little bit of covering, but you know what, the important thing is the job's turning out really well. All right, here we go. Mounted it on the tail just to sort of see how it sits and looks. I mean, I'm really happy with that. Beautiful tension here. I mean, really there's no creases or anything like that in the covering. Love the way that we kind of cut out the space for the control horn down here. So listen, for me that's a really great little period of work, and it's great to finally have something other than, you know, gluing the hinges, of course, having something actually finally complete on the build. Okay, here we go. So really happy with the way the full fin and tail turned out. Now it's time to put on the German cross. So I did a bit of tinkering around with the size of the cross, like how thick it is and how large it is for the surface. So this is actually a test one I did. That's actually on the Oratex. I got an old piece of Oratex and ironed it onto some cardboard. To me, that one looked too thin, so I went back and started messing around, putting a whole bunch of painter's tape down to try and figure out what I thought were the correct dimensions, and I think I've landed on what I think is a really good scale. So it basically, for those of you in the future maybe thinking about creating this cross on a 1/3 scale Fokker D.VII, it was 22 centimeters tall, 22 centimeters wide, and the thickness of the arms is actually 4 centimeters. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a little bit of a mark on the tail here. We'll lay out the painter's tape and then we'll give it a spray and let's see what it looks like. All right, here we go. We've finished all the marking up. So as you can see, I've used painter's tape just to do the outline of the cross. My main tip here is, make sure you push the tape down really firmly, particularly in those joints where you overlap the other tape. The other thing I'll try and do is when I paint it, so I'm using just a satin black rattle can, is don't go too heavy. You want to dust it just enough to sort of fill the colour in, and then leave it for a second. You don't want to have the paint pooling because then it'll start running underneath the tape. So anyway, let's give it a go. So just something I thought I would do is, I've got the new heat gun which I've been using on the Oratex covering, but it's quite cool here in Australia at this time of year, so it's probably only about 16 or 18 degrees where we are right now, probably 16 because we're down at a car park. So I'll use the heat gun just to help kind of like warm up the paint and get it to set a bit faster. All right, here we go. We've mounted the fin and the rudder. I'm not sure about you, but I'm really happy with the way it's turned out. The covering's nice and tight. There's no creases. There's no sort of foldy bits. In terms of the cross, there was a little bit of trial and error just to get the scale of the cross right, but I'm really happy with how it actually looks on the plane. And then even the masking and the spraying and everything, we really got barely any runs, which was fantastic. So all in all, really great weekend's work, really satisfying. So tune in again next time. Now it's time to really get these control surfaces connected up. I'm also going to do some mounting of the servos in the wings and also the elevator servo, and finally putting that rudder servo in place. So we'll see you down the shop next time. Hey everyone, you probably noticed I'm actually wearing some new merch that we've designed for the channel. It's great to see the Just RC logo on a t-shirt. We also ordered some little buttons, some stickers, and even some key rings. So we might make those available to be purchased online at some point. So hope you enjoy them.